Good evening, everyone. It's Juno here today. I want to talk to you about some of the research I've been doing and some of the analysis I've been conducting, what I've concluded about the things I've learned. My objective at this moment is to find out if there is a way of reducing the presence of glutamate simply through thinking, acting, behaving, and eating differently. My purpose for doing this is in reference to the work that I've previously put on this channel, which leads me to believe that an excess of glutamate in the central nervous system in the long term can lead to a deterioration through a process known as excitotoxicity. It's been well known for some time that glutamate is one of the primary neurotransmitters in the brain, and that it is used in many signaling functions. Over 90% of all neurotransmitter emissions are glutamate related. However, what many people don't know is that an accumulation of glutamate can result in a corrosive environment for brain matter. This being the case, I've desired personally to find a way in which I can moderate the amount of glutamate that is present in my system. Now, since this is a natural and autonomic process, you might speculate that there's not much I can do to control it. And I think that would be a reasonable assumption to make. However, not wanting to admit defeat that easily, I've looked to see if there's anything in regards to lifestyle changes that can be done. And through looking at a broad and existential perspective, I suppose there are a few things that you might qualify as having an influence on brain activity and the release of glutamate. Looking back on history, where we are now, fundamentally we are exposed to a great deal of stimulation. Visual, audio, mental stimulation, physical. There are a number of ways in which our attention is constantly being drawn from one thing to another, and I don't believe that was always the case in history. From what I can perceive, there are many things about our lifestyles that have changed and that may be contributing to what appears to be, at least, a rise in neurological pathology. Certain things are unquestionably changed in our modern world, one of which is any adherence to religion or religious doctrine and practice. While on many levels I am critical of mainstream religion, and I do see there being a valid reason for people to leave religious practice, when I think about what is involved in a very disciplined and strict religious adherence, it does make me see some benefits in reducing the opportunity for there to be these excitotoxic events. Prayer and meditation, for example, are something that most people today find extraordinarily difficult to do. Even myself, when I apply myself to try and meditate, attaining that frame of mind is not easy, and I've yet to have a real true success in completely emptying my mind of all thoughts. I compare it sometimes to like visiting a website, and every time you close a pop-up, another one comes up. And you're just infinitely clicking the X button, trying to remove all the pop-ups, but it's almost as if the vacuum of no pop-up causes one to happen, like some virtual particle in space. I've tried a number of techniques, and I've considered how can I attain or get close to that kind of a practice. And I'm very lucky growing up in a Christian country, and I was raised in a Catholic household. I do have some experience of being tutored to pray in a specific way, and I do think that is, in practice, very similar to a type of meditation. And I can see the long-term benefit of undertaking that frequently. Not only in the reduction of glutamate release, but also the, as I said before, adherence to the principles many organized religions extol. And many of them are contrary to our modern life, which is full of immediate gratification, instant satisfaction. Becomes a kind of conveyor belt, just feeding an untold amount of distraction, but always engaging you and always trying to activate your neurology in a way that is more beneficial to it than you. I consider strongly as well the possibility of my normal life experiences. Are there times when I'm able to reduce my thoughts or become more malleable with them so that they're not so strong, they're not so overpowering? And I suppose the example I'm sometimes drawing on now to guide me in some self-meditation is the notion, when I ask a question of someone, I become attentive to their answer, so much so that as long as I'm not making predictions of what that answer might be, but I'm genuinely receptive to it, that instance has very little active thought taking place. And so when I consider trying to attain a thoughtless state of mind, I am sometimes imagining myself waiting for an answer for a question I have yet to ask. This has assisted me in some ways, though as I said, I've yet to attain the level that I desire. Often we look at the people who do suffer with neurological conditions and we question what contributed to this apparently sporadic event. Sometimes it seems to happen to athletes and veterans. Other times it seems to happen to academics and artists. And many would argue that these are very two different types of neurological operation taking place day to day within these individuals. One is a muscular orientated operation, the other is an entirely intellectual one. And I would argue there is a great deal of crossover in these two frames of reference. The competitive sports person, especially when acting as part of a team, has to make a great deal of calculations mentally, and they will frequently exhaust themselves, not just through their activity, but their mental acuity as well. I think there is some evidence perhaps to suggest that exhaustive and repetitive physical activity places a great deal of strain on neurons. And as I already stated, the glutamate response is one involved in many types of transaction. From a neurological perspective, it would be short-sighted to exclude that from sports people and athletes. And then in the other small amount of representation we have for academics and creatives, maybe that is a bit more ostensibly obvious. Nevertheless, the mechanism of action is still one of unsure principles. What would it cause it to happen to one individual when actually it could appear like they were under less mental strain than another? And there are many sufferers of neurological conditions that anecdotally say that they believe stress does play a role, though the scientific data we've accumulated so far doesn't always corroborate that theory. Perhaps the measurements and metrics we're using for the detection of stress have some further development they need to undertake. I think moving forward in life and into the future, opportunities for people to truly relax their mind and try and reduce their overall expression of glutamate are going to become less and less unless they make a conscious decision to take time, look to history, look to what strategies were employed previously, maybe with greater perspective than we take them to have. And using that information, perhaps we can move forward in our own strategies for moderating the amount of glutamate we express, moderating the things we view, and moderating the activities we undertake, having an understanding of what our limits really are, and understanding and accepting those limits. It may be that for some people there's only a certain amount of exercise or difficult, complex thought processes that they are capable of doing in a safe capacity. And with that understanding, perhaps we can advance our ability to manage that situation. Perhaps operating in less well-lit areas. As odd as that sounds to say, I think there may be a necessity to reduce the ocular load placed on our eyes because of the residual effect that has on our mental stimulation. In many ways, when I think about the Stoics and Stoic philosophy, it does appear to be highly beneficial when considering the very topic of this video. What an ideal model for management of glutamate. And again, looking forward, I'll be interested to see how this develops over time. I would encourage everyone to consider, as long as their longevity permits it, the care and dutiful administration of their attention. There are many pressures in the world that encourage us to act on impulse and experience a glut of experiences. And I would argue that there's this scene in Indiana Jones where his father is exclaiming, though Indiana Jones can't hear him, the solution to a particular puzzle that he's addressing to reach his goal. And it says, "The penitent man will pass." And while it does not literally mean a man who has penitence will succeed, in that instance it's referring to the behaviours a penitent man would have are beneficial to completing that task. Namely being that he should kneel to avoid the booby trap that's been set for him. Maybe from the perspective of biological longevity, it's the hesitant man that survives. And those who are lacking in patience will preach that life is short and you must live it now, and patience is not a virtue that you can accommodate for. And in some ways they can be right, because by living that way it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Nevertheless, we do see people, especially men who reach advanced years, routinely display great levels of moderation. So I believe this may have a strong influence on their ability to continue to live long and healthy lives. But as I said, this isn't something necessarily overtly beneficial for the economy or for the utilization of certain groups of people. When pressure is placed upon you to influence you into further action, you might rightly suspect that there is some element of manipulation or gaslighting taking place. And you begin to understand that that further action may only benefit you slightly or not at all, but it benefits someone else a great deal. Yet in life, we're not often asked to consider that, be it in a career perspective or by various members of the community, or even those in power above us. But I would implore everyone to consider, for their health, the example of the hesitant man, the patient man, and the prayerful man. Take care of yourselves.